What's up, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. As always, we are brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Head on over to Branded Bills online, and you can get 15% off your first purchase just by using the promo code up on the corner of the screen, BBPHLY. Tyler Zulli, Fran Duff here. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. And Fran, first and foremost, a happy Tuesday to you. The new rankings should come out soon. Our official first new rankings of the year. Kind of a topsy-turvy week in the top 10 with a couple of really good matchups. And then, of course, a couple of matchups that you would call cupcake or tune-up or, pay-for-play type of games that we'll get into in just a second. But first and foremost, a happy Tuesday to you. Hope your Labor Day weekend was awesome.
Yeah, it was, a great first week of full slate of games. Obviously, we got the NFL next Sunday, but being able to get a full slate of some big-time college football matchups. First time in like 4 decades, we saw this many top 10 teams lose in the opening week, and that's the nature of having some of these big games. But a really fun first week of college football. I'm excited to dig into it.
All right, so we'll do that in just a second, but we do want to remind you it is September, and with September comes a really important month for not just us here at PHLY, but for across the All-City landscape and beyond, because we have partnered with Big Brother, Big Sister, and September is Big Brother, Big Sister month, and their headline here is "A Moment Together Can Spark Endless Laughter." It is an incredible opportunity to join as a big brother or a big sister to impact the lives of kids around the world. And Big Brother, Big Sister has been a significant leader in mentorship and continues to evolve with its impact, its significance. There are over 20 million Big Brother, Big Sister alumni worldwide, and it's why that they've been able to talk about their longevity and their impact just on how important that they are to the lives of those the youth that need it the most. And with 120 years of mentorship, it's a lifetime of impact. And how can you help out? Well, of course, you can head on over to Big Brother, Big Sister online. It's bbbs.org. You can donate to help ensure that they have 120 more years of impact, or you can join our fundraiser, which of course is attached to our YouTube page here. If you are part or an alum of the BBBS program, you can share your story here. That would be awesome to hear. But an awesome, impactful event that is going on all month. And BBBS is a huge part of us here at ALLCITY and at PHLY, and we love to be able to give back. So if you're capable, I understand that sometimes finances are difficult at this stage of life, but if you're capable, we would love to have you be a part of our fundraiser, which is going on all month here in September, benefiting Big Brothers and Big Sister. All right, let's get into it. Let's dive into
a huge initiative. Excited to be a part of it.
Let's dive into it, Fran, because as I said, there were, as you brought up, a ton of top 10 matchups and top 10 teams that went down. We'll talk about more about them in a little bit. But let's talk about this game that was Penn State and Nevada. And it's why I use the headline expected result, because when you see these types of games, and again, you can use the pay for play, the tune up, the scheduled loss, which is unfortunate phrasing. But when you face a team that was preseason ranked 120 of the 136 teams, I think there are expectations of putting up a lot of points, playing rock steady defense, walking out of there with getting a lot of your younger, inexperienced players some playing time. And I think on the surface, all of those things were accomplished this weekend for James Franklin and his staff. France, 73 different players got action for Penn State this weekend, offense, defense, special teams, and almost 50 of them played at least 20 snaps between those 3 facets of the game. So you've been around the game a long time. You've worked at both the college and the pro level. So speaking about these types of games just from the onset, because the results are expected, speaking about these games from the onset, what does it mean for a college football team, especially one that may have some younger players, to be able to get some action early in the season like this, now that you can play a multiple games and still end up being redshirted later in the year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the NCAA, passing that new rule a few years ago where you can play 4 years or play 4 games and still keep your red shirt, not including the bowl game. So, I think that is big for having these kinds of opportunities early in a season, especially for a team like Penn State, where, look, you have national title aspirations. You've got aspirations to go to the postseason, make the college football playoff. But Well, as we talked about last week, you have to replace Abdul Carter. You got to replace Tyler Warren. You got some big pieces. You have a new defensive scheme. So having games like this early in the season allows the new defensive scheme guys to, make sure you test some new things out. Then if you want to try and find which of these young players maybe would we want to burn a red shirt on, right? So you have some of those. You had a lot of pass rushers that were able to get out there. You had a lot of receivers that were able to see some playing time. So being able to get a taste of what some of these young guys can offer, that is invaluable here for Penn State to open up the season. Game 1 here against Nevada. You got FIU this week, which we'll talk about. Being able to have these kinds of opportunities early in the season before you get into the meat of your schedule in conference play, that is really valuable for a team like PSU.
So I often find, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I often find that these games are sometimes the hardest to break down because of vanilla play calling, right? And I think that was the theme of yesterday's or Saturday's game, that was the theme of the game, was expected outcome. And we talked earlier in the week about Andy Kotelnicki and the threat of scheming, his scheme and how he's able to scheme guys open. And we'll talk more about the new receivers a little bit, but to me, it felt like this was very page 1 stuff. It was outside zone. It was inside trap. It was, a lot of hooks and curls and slants and, obviously trying to get your guys schemed open, but it felt like it was very much a vanilla offensive playbook for Andy Kotelnicki and James Franklin and their staff. So I think I almost am viewing this game, and the same with FIU and Villanova at the end of it, as they go from playing 3 games at which they not only should win, but win very handedly, to then having a bye and then going into Big Ten play playing Oregon. You don't even have a Big Ten ramp up where you get a Northwestern or a Rutgers or a team like that. You're going right into playing Oregon, a top 10 team in the nation in their own right. And so I think 2 things happen out of this. One, it feels to me like they're going to try to put as little on tape as they possibly can while still executing and beating these teams handedly like they should. And second, this is a veteran-laden team like you and I brought up last week.
Yep.
If there's any team that can flip the switch from non-conference easy games to playing Oregon at home in the whiteout to really kind of test your mettle as a big-time program, this veteran-laden team should be it. So what we saw on Saturday felt like it was just almost like preseason NFL football, where it was a lot of vanilla stuff, and they're not going to put a whole lot on tape until they get to as close to the Oregon game as they possibly can.
Yeah, and you want to do so while still being able to get those vets some quality reps. We saw 3 quarters essentially of the starting offense. You look at that group. Yeah, it's year 2 under Andy Kotelnicki, where it's you've got Drew Aller as the starter. We know the running backs, the offensive line, everybody kind of returning from that standpoint outside of Tyler Warren. But you're breaking in these new receivers, and we'll talk about the impact and some of the things that we saw from those guys. But I think the big thing that I took away watching that group operate those first 3 quarters was, we didn't see all the bells and whistles, but you still do need to work on some of that stuff because it's going to be a fabric of what you're built upon, during the final 3 quarters of the season. And so we did see some unique shifts, where the guys are going to be lined up one way, and then last second they're going to change the formation and then run a play. We saw that numerous times. We saw some of the misdirection element. Are they going to do a ton of that? Probably not. Obviously, we didn't see that over the course of the entire game, and it's less so as the game wears on. But you still want to incorporate some of it because it does require a sense of timing and execution. You want to make sure you kind of iron out the wrinkles there before you get to Oregon in week 5. And so I do think that we'll continue to see a little bit more of that here this week against FIU and next week against Villanova. But it's something that, you're not going to really turn that dial until you get into Big Ten play.
I was listening to Landon Tengwell's podcast, who obviously is a former Penn State offensive lineman, has done a really nice job, I think, over the last couple of years of breaking down the film. And he kind of laid out that same sentiment of like, this is a veteran-laden group who has been through the ringers of a deep postseason run, maybe unexpected, but they were there nonetheless, a deep postseason run. They've been with James Franklin. And one of the things really, it was funny, Fran, that jumped out to me on the broadcast on Saturday, they pretty quickly said, James Franklin heading into his 12th year as Penn State's head coach.
Crazy.
And I'm like, hold on, wait, what? Because I was a student at Penn State when James Franklin took over as the head coach. And I don't feel like it's been 12 years since I've been a student at Penn State. So this is starting to make me feel a little bit old. But now they have There's no question marks. I don't think any question marks about the head coach, because for a long time the question was, and rightfully so, with a team like Penn State, the question was, can this guy win big games? And I think last year he put a quell to a lot of that. And I understand that maybe SMU and Boise State were not the caliber of opponent that Notre Dame or Ohio State or Oregon was, the teams that they've lost to last year, but he won 2 playoff games, did it pretty convincingly in both settings. And then you have a returning group of 14 starters among the offense and the defense. This year, I think the expectations, and it's why we talked about it last week, are through the roof. And if there is a group between having a head coach now in his 12th season, and I know that it's a new defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, but Andy Kotelnicki in his second full season as the offensive coordinator, there's stability there. There's stability on the line. As you talked about, the running backs and the quarterback. If there's a group that can kind of flip that switch as best as possible, at least in terms of Penn State's teams, this is probably the one that has the capability of doing it.
Yeah, and that's the hope when you are the coaching staff and you look at both sides of the ball, and you have more returning personnel on offense, but I think at the end of the day, you want to be able to lean on those guys, especially because this is not a 12 game, maybe 13 or 14 game season. You're hoping that this is a 16 game season again for Penn State, 17 games. So I think when you're looking at that, you want to make sure you keep those guys fresh and just get ready to ramp this up, because as you mentioned, you have that early bye, so you're going to and you hit the ground running against Oregon. So yeah, you're going to lean on those veteran leaders, those senior leaders. You have the Kaytron Allens and the Drew Hollers, and you go down the list there. The Drew Sheltons on the offensive side, and then you go to the defensive side as well. And a lot of guys that are tenured, have been in the program now for multiple seasons and are ready to see this team take that next step to really compete for a national title once again. So I do think that that's going to be on the forefront of that organization's mind, of that coaching staff's mind, as they get ready for the season. I think we're seeing that play out.
And one guy, by the way, you bring up the veteran group and the defense. One guy who's been a veteran, just not with the team, that we'll talk a little bit later about, was Amari Campbell, who you brought up in last week's show, and you had high expectations of him paired side by side with Tony Rojas. Campbell wearing the green sticker as the kind of communicator of the defense. So I definitely want to talk to you about his game specifically in just a little bit as well. The last thing that I want to bring up is, just the overarching conversation of Saturday's game before we dive into the X's and O's was, it wasn't perfect. There were things that needed to be cleaned up. And I know, like, people look at it and go, 46-11. You're kind of nitpicking here a little bit. You're talking about a team that one-handedly, they gave up the touchdown late. It was mostly the backups, and in some instances, the third strings that allowed the touchdown to be scored. It was 46-3 or 39-3, I guess, when a majority of the starters exited the game. They win the game 46-11. What do you have to complain about? But I do think there were some things that could be cleaned up, and James Franklin brought it up as well. The red zone opportunities for this team. This was a team that had enormous success scoring touchdowns in the red zone last season. And I think if you want to have success at a high level, you're going to have to do it again this year. And there were a couple of drives in the game where they settled for field goals. And James Franklin talked about it, how they have to be able to stay ahead of schedule. But there were 2 drives specifically, Fran, that kind of jumped out to me as things that could be cleaned up. They had an interception early in the first quarter. They got the ball on Nevada 6. So it was first and goal from the 6-yard line. They got 2 yards on first down, 3 yards on second down. Drew Aller was sacked for a 9-yard loss. On third down, they settled for a field goal. Then later in the game, King Mack has it was Khalil Dinkins, I apologize, has the big kick return, sets them up at Nevada's 18. First down, they go -3, incomplete on second down. Aller's able to pick up 11 on third down with his legs, but he's short of the sticks. And it was two drives that started in the red zone. Not getting to the red zone and settling, started in the red zone, and one on the 6 that they ended up coming away with 6 points on. So I think there are some things that can still be cleaned up, and that's what James Franklin and this staff will look towards, as you brought up, kind of to build on and to get timing and rhythm down as they go into these next 2 non-conference games.
Yeah, and that's one of the downsides when you do have a defensive performance like what they did early in this game, where you get those early turnovers, you get those short fields, is that now you don't necessarily get to see the offense really like build into a rhythm at all, and you're thrown into the sudden change situation where now, all right, you've got the ball on the 22, you've got the ball on the 7, now you have to go out and execute. in in a tighter field. And so I do think, yeah, they're going to want to improve the red zone efficiency. That is something from a year-to-year basis. You see this in the NFL where touchdown percentage in the red zone, that is not always something that is sticky from year to year. That there can be some volatility there because it's such a small sample. You don't have a ton of red zone opportunities over the course of an entire season contextually compared to what we see with other stats. And so that is something where if you're a Penn State fan, you're hoping that they're able to replicate that same level of efficiency from 2024 into this season, because we know those high leverage plays can mean a great deal, especially when you get into conference play. You go into Oregon, you're going to you're playing Ohio State and Michigan and some of the other best teams in the conference. You can't be settling for field goals when you've got the opportunity to score touchdowns. And so that is an area where this offense was really strong last year, and creativity had a big part of that. So, we talked earlier at the top of the show, yeah, they're not going to be as creative in these games. Well, all right, you got to rely on these guys to go out and win. And in areas they were able to do it. We saw them finish drives with both running backs into the end zone. I think that's something they'll continue to try and see if they can work out over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so and it's interesting because you bring up the fluidity between year to year, especially in the NFL. It's strange when, more times than not, if you have a good offensive team, you're going to probably return a majority of those guys that are under contracts. I get the fluctuation at the college level a little bit, but with this team, I think what you brought up is, Tyler Warren played a huge part in that, not just in the passing game, obviously, but also in the run game. Not just in the tight end blocking portion of the run game, but he lined up at quarterback in the red zone. He lined up at H-back. He lined up in the Wildcat. He lined up at a whole bunch of different spots that allowed them to have that type of movement and creativity and create one-on-one matchups. Because last year, they were 25th in college football in red zone scoring, 89.4%. Now, they scored in the red zone. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to complain about that. But last year, they were 7th in red zone rushing touchdowns with 28. They also had 20 red zone passing touchdowns, which is good for 6th. So they had 48 red zone touchdowns last year and 11 red zone field goals. So basically 4 out of every 5, even a little bit more, trips to the red zone that they scored, they were scoring touchdowns. Again, I'm kind of nitpicking here a little bit because of a dominant win, a pretty expected win. But I do think those are things that heading into, as you get the Big Ten play, should be cleaned up.
No question. I think the big thing there is that when you're looking at last year and some of that red zone success that you mentioned, a lot of you have the Tyler. It's like the tush push with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. You had those Tyler Warren QB sneaks, and that's where that creativity, kind of really came into play with this Penn State offense. And I think when you're looking this year, again, if you're not going to incorporate that into the game plan in these early games, well, all right, that means you're going to lean on the run game. And then you just need Drew Aller to be precise. And there was the one play, honestly, it was probably his worst miss of the afternoon against Nevada. It was that slant route to Hudson that he just kind of threw it behind him. It was a clean miss, clean pocket, steps into it and just puts it on the back shoulder of the receiver. Should have been out in front. That was his worst miss of the day. But again, when you're talking about small sample, in the red zone, drop back throw, you want to be able to hit that. Those are the kinds of plays that you want to be able to just go out and make sure you execute on.
I'm glad you brought that play up because it was something I wanted to talk about when we got to the receiver. So let's talk about it now before we hit our first break. That play specifically, because we were discussing it amongst ourselves with the group that I was watching it with, is that a throw where he almost would prefer to go back shoulder because of the safety that was perhaps over top? You could kind of see it in the screen a little bit, at least on the broadcast, starting to creep over. The safety was there. Is that trying to be like too precise with that throw? Is that just a misstep? What was kind of your read on that throw?
My read on it was that it was just a missed throw, but I'd be interested to hear what Aller said. Obviously, I'm not in his mind, so you can't say with complete certainty. I do think that there was enough separation from the safety in the middle of the field that he could put that on the front shoulder and be okay there. If it's a tighter window, that's where you'll typically see quarterbacks try and put that behind them. But on a throw like that, I think you're able to put that on the face mask and call that a touchdown. And so I'd want to hear James Franklin or Drew Aller talk through that, or maybe Hudson. But it's one of those plays where ultimately I put that on more on the quarterback. I'm sure Hudson and maybe the receivers coach might say, oh, you know what, we got to come up with that ball. But to me, I put that more as a straight miss on the quarterback.
All right, so Penn State wins comfortably, 46-11 over Nevada. We'll dive deeper into the receivers in our big deal segment coming up. I know you did a lot of deep dive tape work on both Kyron Hudson and Trebor Pena before the season started. Curious your thoughts after week one. We'll talk more about them. We'll get into our picks for the top five as the rankings are set to unfold, of course, and then we'll wrap up today's show with a little bit of a breakdown of the FIU Panthers. It is the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. We are brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills, and we will be right back after this. All right, speaking of Branded Bills, let me tell you about our friends over at Branded Bills. First and foremost, 15% off right off the rip. You can't beat that. But whether you're looking for a snapback hat, a trucker hat, the fitted hat, beanies, tees, Branded Bills has you covered with not just style, but also with performance. It's gear that is going to make you stand apart from the crowd. So whether you're standing at Beaver Stadium or you're at a backyard barbecue like I was at this weekend watching the game, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. You can get it in incredible sleek styles. And as I said, it comes in all the different styles. So like I said, I'm wearing my PHLY snapback today, but you can get your Branded Bills Penn State hat and look just as clean as this hat does here at PHLY. Start your order and get worked one-on-one with a dedicated team that's going to help you create the exact custom apparel that you're looking for. And as I mentioned, they have a partnership with Penn State as part of their campus collection process. So there's an incredible selection. There's like 30 hats. There's maybe even more. I just skimming through it quickly to see which ones I loved. I already bought two pairs, or bought a pair of hats because I love them so much. You can skim through all of not only just your Penn State gear, but all of the college collective program as well. So head on over to brandedbills.com, use that promo code BBPHLY for 15% off of your order and start looking sleek and stylish with our friends over at Branded Bills.
And now we'll hear from our friends over at Cherry Hill Kia, because if you're looking for the dealership with the most inventory and super low lease payments in the Philadelphia area, KiaofCherryHill.com is the place to go. You can choose from over 450 new Kias, including the Telluride, the Sportage, K5s, Carnivals, Seltos, Souls, and more. And I've got to tell you, Kia is the hottest automotive brand in the country for a reason. You can't take a ride on 95 or on 76 down the boulevard and not see, there's another Telluride. There's another Kia Soul, the Sportage. It's one of the hottest vehicles on the market. 7 of their models received 2025 Car and Driver Editor's Choice Awards. That is amazing, considering that there were more than 450 models tested and only 20 models industry-wide received this award. You combine that with the best warranty in the automotive business, 10 years, 100,000-mile powertrain, and 5 years, 60,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty. Stop in today, tell them the PHLY sent you, and receive a $100 restaurant.com gift card just for taking a test drive or completing a trade appraisal. I know that people buy Kias elsewhere. I just don't know why. Drive home in your new Kia today, just minutes from all bridges, or available online 24/7 at KiaofCherryHill.com.
All right, welcome back to the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. We are brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Again, head on over to brandedbills.com. Use the code BBPHLY for 15% off your first purchase. And of course, we're broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. Tyler Zulli, Fran Duffy, and let's get into our big deal segment here on the show today. And of course, our big deal segment is brought to you by our friends over at Kia of Cherry Hill. Again, they'll treat you like family. You can get in on all of the incredible Kias that Fran just laid out. But if you didn't pay attention to it, you should. First and foremost, that's rude. Fran did an awesome job of doing his reads. And second of all, you can get in at any time, 24/7 at cherryhillkia.com. All right, let's get into our big deal segment of the day. And I thought the big deal, Fran, was something that you brought up on last week's show. It's something that was kind of a question mark heading into the season. And it was the new wide receiver room for this Penn State group. And namely, Kyron Hudson and Trebor Pena. We'll get into Devontae Ross a little bit. He didn't factor too much, but kind of expected coming back from the injury, was kind of slow played. But I thought the two guys that really stood out were Hudson and Pena. And to me, I thought if you were to ask me one of those two guys that really stood out, it was Kyron Hudson. Not just because of the productivity, 6 for 89 and a score, which was great to see. I thought he was clearly the best receiver on the field, at least in my estimation. I thought his routes were really strong. I thought his separation felt good. And the one catch that really stood out to me from Hudson in this one was the toe drag catch along the sideline. That looked like an NFL caliber route and an NFL caliber ability to find the football. The hands were strong. He maintained possession the whole way, drug the toe. It was a really excellent catch, throw and catch from Allard to Hudson. But it felt to me like these two guys were pretty routinely able to create separation. And again, opponent matters, I think. But when you looked at a team last year that did not have a single starting wide receiver have 6 catches in a game all season long, and you had 2 within the first game of the season, this is a revamped wide receiver room, and it feels like they're definitely trending in the right direction after the first game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things, and I'll make this also like a part of the Drew Aller conversation as well, because we talked about this last week. One of the big things that I wanted to see from Drew Aller this year is increased faith in that receiving core to be able to come through for him down the field, intermediate area, try and test some tight window throws. And it's not just underneath, check down, screen game, like those kinds of manufactured touches for those guys on the perimeter. And I think that was one of the big takeaways for me watching this win against Nevada, is that Drew Aller was able to attempt a couple of those deep comebacks, those deep outbreaking routes. He hit Pena on a couple. Those were the throws that actually kind of moved the needle for me the most, were the ones to Pena. He was able to hit Hudson, as you mentioned, on that touchdown, or rolling to his left. That was a little bit late in the down, scramble drill type of situation where Aller started to his right, worked his way back, and saw that Hudson was breaking open in zone coverage. A little bit of a bust there, from the defender in that area. But I think when you're looking at both receivers with Pena and Hudson coming in through the transfer portal, that was one of the big things I wanted to see. And I think, honestly, it's the biggest thing for Penn State to get situated and kind of get the ball rolling in a positive direction here in these first 3 games to start the season before the bye week and before Big Ten conference schedule comes into play. Is, can Drew Aller develop rapport, develop confidence in these new receivers, where if it's 3rd and 8, does he feel good targeting Hudson? Does he feel good targeting Pena? You almost want to see the ball go through the hoop, to kind of borrow an analogy from the basketball world, is that you almost want to be able to see, hey, you know what? I've got faith in these guys. I know I can lean on these guys in these situations. And so, for Hudson to come through and make that kind of big time catch, to me, that again, he was kind of working on a vertical route. It was against cover 2. The safety on that side kind of took the cheese on a route towards the middle of the field and left Hudson open. So Aller gets over to that side, steps up to his left and makes a throw. It wasn't the best throw on the run, but obviously put it in the area where Hudson can go and get it. And he made a nice adjustment to the ball and was able to come through with the touchdown. I thought that the throws that he made to Pena to similar areas of the field, in their intermediate area, opposite hash throws where he gets rid of it early before the receiver leaves his break. So he shows anticipation, he shows trust, and he puts the ball on the money there in those scenarios. I thought that those were 2 really impressive throws from Aller. And again, I just want to continue to see more of that this week against FIU. The best pro prospect for FIU, the kid Blades, is a corner. And so maybe we can kind of see some matchups there. Really, he's the only guy that is on the NFL radar right now going into the season from this Golden Panthers team. So that would be something to watch. But I think ultimately that was one of my big takeaways watching this offense. It was like, all right, this is what you wanted to see, and I want to see more of it here this week against FIU. Yeah,
I think, I was trying to go back through the recent history of Penn State receivers, and for a while it was a good run of receivers who not only had good college productivity, but ended up having NFL productivity. I think it started with Allen Robinson, and it went to Chris Godwin. It went to Jahan Dotson. It went to KJ Hamler, and even guys that were perhaps productive at the college level, like a Deshaun Hamilton type of receiver. Yeah. There was a pretty sizable drop off between that, 10-year or so run to last season, where Amari Evans was not quite as good as you were hoping he would be, where, like we talked the other week about, I long for Keandre Lambert-Smith, who I was not a big fan of at Penn State, had a much better year at Auburn, translated to him going to the NFL and kind of sticking with the Jags for a little bit, right? So this is a much needed boost for this team. And I just think about the ability to create separation just was not there yet last year, even with good athletes, good skill position players. Just they weren't creating the separation that Drew Aller needed, which goes back to your point about the trust and manufacturing that trust. Was he was not going to try to fit the ball into those tight windows to those receivers because he didn't fully grasp that they were going to come down with it, where if he was going to throw that ball to Tyler Warren, he'd throw that ball to Tyler Warren.
No question.
Or Nick Singleton out of the backfield.
Yeah, we saw Singleton used in that way a couple times. They dialed up a couple of plays for Singleton in space. But I think when you're looking at, again, what do those guys bring like in a vacuum? Hudson, like the athleticism and the movement didn't necessarily get me too excited. It's a little bit of a slow twitch, like possession outside the numbers type in terms of what I saw on film against Nevada. Pena, I mentioned last week that I went back and watched all of his targets. He was highly productive last year for the number one pass game in college football at Syracuse, catching passes from Kyle McCord. And he is like your classic, like movement, slot, gadget, screen game type of guy. And that's what the usage looked like here this week with Penn State. And so I'm interested to see, okay, to me, let's try and continue to push that button a little bit, leverage that skill set with Pena. I think he's going to be the move guy. You look at Hudson, reliable, get him outside the numbers. Maybe he's not always going to be this consistent deep threat, but if it's 3rd and 7, he can get you 8, like that. That kind of dynamic there for Drew Aller. And then you get Devontae Ross. If once he gets up to speed off that injury, you mentioned we expected it was going to be a little bit of a slow burn for him to start the season. So the other guys that were out there, redshirt senior Liam Clifford got plenty of run. Used mostly as a blocker and as kind of a complementary piece, but he got plenty of run in this game as well.
Yeah, the one guy I brought him up last week that I would like to see get a little bit more push as the season goes on is Tyseer Denmark. I'd be interested to see how they're going to use him, but at least that top 3 that you bring up with Ross, Pena, and Hudson, I think are probably going to be the 3, along with the 2 tight ends that they're going to implement, and maybe even Rappleyea as the season gets on, the 2 running backs, and that's kind of the grouping of pass catchers that you're going to see for a bulk of the season, especially heading into Big Ten play. All right, that's our big deal segment, again, brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Hill Kia. They treat you like family, and that's great because sometimes you get in on some of these deals and you just feel like you're being berated or hounded. Not with our friends over at Cherry Hill Kia. All right, we're going to pause for just a moment. On the other side, we still have to get to Amari Campbell's tape, which I know, Fran, you were raving about and kind of how he pairs with Tony Rojas in the linebacking group. And then we'll talk more about FIU as we get towards the end of the show, and take a look at the rest of the college football landscape, because there were some fun games, there were some blowouts, and there was some everything in between. We'll do it here on the All Nittany Lion podcast. We are brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Use that code BBPHLY at brandedbills.com for 15% off of your first purchase. And we'll be right back after this. All right, let's start with our friends over at TrueMark. And yes, of course, I was driving to work today, and the school zones were out. The buses were out because, unfortunately, it is kind of the end of summer. Labor Day was the last hurrah for a lot of people, and that means school is back. And so, listen, if you are someone who has kids in the school age, you understand how difficult finances can be when it comes to buying books, notebooks. And now it's not just books and pencils and protractors and erasers anymore. It's laptops and tablets and headphones. Well, with our friends over at TrueMark, you can continue to feel comfortable that you're going to get at least your money's worth, because when you use your TrueMark Financial Union debit card, you earn rewards every time you swipe that card and you choose credit for all of your back-to-school purchases. Whether, again, it's something small like snacks or school shoes, or it's something that maybe hits the wallet a little bit more, like that tablet that you need, you're going to be earning points while you do it. And those points, you can redeem them for cash, travel, retail, gift cards, merchandise, and so much more. Listen, I already personally have my eye on a gift card that is going to help cover our travel at the end of the year. We're going to do a little bit of traveling once the baseball season's over. I know that I can get that gift card with the TrueMark Financial Credit Union debit card. So it feels good knowing that you could be getting a little something back just for buying the things that you need anyway. So if you're already a TrueMark Financial Credit Union member, be sure to check out your debit card benefits before you start to shop. And if you're not a member yet, now is an incredible time to join. Just stop by one of TrueMark Financial Credit Union's 24 branches or visit them online at TrueMark.com to open an account today. TrueMark Financial Credit Union is federally insured by the NCUA. All right, let me tell you about our friends over at Bet365 while we figure out Fran's situation, because whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And find out why 90 million users worldwide have turned into Bet365, because they're the pioneers of live in-game betting. 780,000 live stream events, over 78 different sports. So it's not just baseball, football, basketball. There's Fran. We'll get back to him in just a minute. It's not just football, baseball, basketball, hockey. It's anything you want. You can do it any time of the day. And of course, with Bet365, you can get in on the MLB. It's probably the bet of the play of the year, right? Because if your team goes up by 5 runs at any point across any MLB game, you are going to win immediately. Any bet that is a straight bet or a parlay selection marked as a winner, you're going to win. You're going to win instantly. Don't have to worry about a late inning comeback or heroics like you saw in Milwaukee, which was good for the local squad, of course. But if you had the other team, it might be a little bit more different. But if you're up by 5 runs at any point, you cash out, and you'll find out why it's never ordinary at Bet365. And how about this right now? New users, download the app, use the promo code PHLY365, which is at the bottom of your screen, deposit $10, place a bet for just $5, and you'll now get $200 back in bonus bets, whether your bet wins or loses. You can use that bonus bet money on spreads, totals, player props, futures, so much more. You find out why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, welcome back to the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY, of course, brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. Tyler Zulli and Fran Duffy. And Fran, let's turn our attention to the defensive side of things here for Penn State, and one player in particular that you really seem to like and rave about in Saturday's game was Amari Campbell. Talked about him earlier in the show, talked about him last week. Transfer from UNC, wearing the green sticker, but very, very appreciated and respected clearly by Jim Knowles and James Franklin. He'll line up next to Tony Rojas, who I really have a lot of high praise for. But what did you see from Amari Campbell specifically in this game against Nevada that kind of jumped out to you? Why did you want to pinpoint his tape specifically?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was excited to see what he would look like next to Rojas, who is, rangy, athletic, weak side linebacker, sideline to sideline guy, can pressure, can make plays in coverage. We saw that last year for Penn State. What would Campbell look like? Both guys are true juniors, third-year players. Campbell, to me, like hammerhead, just downhill, violent, some really good collisions, whether he was taking on blocks or finishing as a tackler. There was one play where Nevada had the advantage from a number standpoint, blocking up the box for Penn State. It was a quarterback run, so the running back inserts and is going to take on Campbell in the hole. He defeats that block. Campbell gets off the running back and makes the play on the quarterback. It would have been a nice play there for Nevada. And so he had another play like that later on in the game as well, taking on that lead block, getting off and making the play on the ball carrier. So I thought being able to see Campbell in that role, you mentioned he wore the green dot as the Mike linebacker with Rojas. And then they're going to mix in Dominic DeLuca as well, elder statesman, and he's going to be the Mike. So he'll wear the green dot in that scenario. They kept Campbell on the field, and Campbell slid over to weak side linebacker to have Rojas get a breather as well. So being able to see Campbell in both those roles, I thought was really big for this Penn State defense. Yeah,
6 total tackles for Campbell. He led all Penn State defenders with 6 tackles. He also had 3 solo tackles, which ranks tied for third. Amongst Penn State defenders as well. But, I think defensively as a whole, we brought it up a little bit earlier in the show, and just kind of going off of the eye number, because I didn't pick it up specifically. It looks like there's about almost 25 players, and maybe a little bit short of 25 players who recorded at least 1 tackle in Saturday's game. And that goes back to, getting guys reps and getting a multitude of different players involved. But I think between Amari Campbell, who stood out because, as you said, new addition, what was he going to look like? How would he fit in? Led the team in tackles. The other guy defensively, I think, that really stood out to me was Dennis Sutton, who we kind of expected to stand out, was going to be asked to take on a lot of the role of not just what he had last year, which was a sizable defensive end and edge rusher role in and of himself, but to become the number 1 edge rusher for this team and replacing Abdul Carter. And I thought he filled in very admirably. 5 tackles, 4 solo, had a sack, 2 TFLs, a pass deflection. I thought he was kind of all over the field. Now, there were a couple of times where he, I think Purdy rolled and Dennis Sutton was trying to chase him down, and you could tell it does not have Abdul Carter's speed, which, to be fair, most players don't have Abdul Carter's speed. But, there was a little bit of a lost step between Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton coming off the edge. But he's such a pressure creator, a havoc wrecker, a game changer. And the thing is, whether he's got that fleet of foot speed or not. And he's not slow. He's just not Abdul Carter. Whether he's got that speed or not, he finds himself in the right place at the right time, almost on a very consistent basis. And it's just like, there's no question of where Dennis Sutton is going to be is in the right spot more times than not on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you play with the effort and the intensity, the motor that Dennis Sutton does, only good things happen. It's very similar to like the Reuben Bain interception, the Miami pass rusher on Monday night against Notre Dame, or on Sunday night, I should say, against Notre Dame, where you see that effort, that instant chase ability, and Dennis Sutton plays that same way. You get the violent punch out for the forced fumble on the opening drive. I like the motor from the backside, showed up a number of times. He had a huge hit on the Nevada quarterback on Purdy to force an incompletion. That was nearly a sack fumble. He did get a sack as a quarterback spy in the third quarter. He definitely has some athletic limitations. I think that kind of cap his ceiling. He's been in some mock drafts as a potential first-round pick. I don't think he's that caliber of athlete that would necessarily go that high. You mentioned, certainly not Abdul Carter. I do think it's going to be interesting. And I don't know that any of these guys are Abdul Carter, but because you didn't get Zariah Fisher getting the start, he was a guy that was coming in, a presumed starter, redshirt senior. We saw a lot of freshmen opposite Dennis Sutton. So Jalen Harvey got the start, number 44, but you saw plenty of the true freshman Chaz Coleman as well. Both guys, you can see like younger players, some physical development that's going to be required there. But I think it was good to be able to get those guys reps as Fisher gets acclimated. They held him out. He was listed as potentially questionable coming in. He missed a good amount of camp with what was described as bumps and bruises by James Franklin. He missed all of last year as well. Fisher did. So, hopefully they can get him healthy and we'll see what presence he can bring opposite to Dennis Sutton. We saw some good things from Zane Durant. You mentioned the interception as well. Just a dynamic athlete. You're hoping that you're able to get some good pressure from Durant up the middle against quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, I mean, just the numbers jump out to you, right? And the one thing I didn't bring up about Dennis Sutton was the two forced fumbles as well. And the one felt like it was not a chase down punch out, but it was, from behind. It seemed like the play had gotten around him just a little bit. He gets back into the play, punches it out, and forces the fumble. I thought the defense as a whole swarmed pretty well. I mean, the two forced fumbles, the interception. I think as a collective unit, they were they swarmed to the football. And it was funny. I made a joke after the punch out where basically I said, I feel like anybody who plays on the defensive side of the field, if you're looking the proper technique and the proper form as to how to force a fumble, all you have to do is watch Peanut Tillman highlights on repeat. And you kind of know that that's how you're going to punch out. But that it looked like a, from behind, punch the ball, like get to the ball carrier, punch it out, and make the big play. And I think you saw that multiple times, not just from Dennis Sutton, but from this group as a whole. They really kind of swarmed pretty defensively. And I think the words that James Franklin used to describe at least Dennis Sutton was like, guy eats, sleeps, breathes, lives, dreams football type of thing. So this is the type of guy who is going to play, as you brought up, with that motor, even if like the step is great. It's not, how do you do it instead of Abdul Carter? But the motor is going to be firing at 100% all the time.
No question. And I agree with you in terms of like the overall like feel and identity from this Penn State defense. Like you could kind of feel that team, watching them on film, which is like, all right, these guys are flying to the football. There was a lot of violence. I thought there was a pretty good tackling performance from this unit overall. Zakee Wheatley had a great one-on-one tackle against Purdy in the hole and a speed option play in the first quarter. I thought that Aldavian Collins was, he came down and was really physical playing on the perimeter, the redshirt junior corner. And, we didn't have Zion Tracy in this game, who's going to be the nickel corner. So with Tracy not playing, you saw another freshman in Kenny Wosley, get quality reps there. So being able to see all these guys worked in and kind of fit that mentality, I think it's really big, certainly for this group as they, again, you want to try and figure out who are some of the young guys that we're going to be able to lean on as we get into the meat of this schedule. That's what these next 3 weeks are going to be all about.
All right, so let's pause. On the other side, we're going to start to kind of preview FIU and what they do well and what to look for heading into this week. And then we're going to wrap things up with the top 5 list of our own. And it may not look exactly the same as the top 5 rankings heading into this week from the AP and from the writers, but we'll kind of talk through the 5 teams that we've identified as the top 5 teams in college football, at least at this current juncture, after the way that week one unfolded. We'll do that on the other side as well. It's the All Nittany Lion podcast. We are brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios. And as always, we'll be right back after this. All right, let me tell you about our friends over at Ace and Ace Hardware Home Services, because you know that Ace is the place with the helpful hardware folks, right? But did you know that the helpful hardware folks are willing to come to your house and do that work and give you that same feel right to your front door, all the way from Philly to the Jersey Shore? And if it's something that you need to say, we've got to get fixed for a year now, right? Just an outlet, right? They're going to be the people that get that done, because they're not just the helpful hardware folks, but they are helpful hardware home service team as well. But it might be something bigger. It might be something more important. Plumbing, electric, heating, cooling. Please, if you're not a professional, don't try to do it yourself. They are the trusted pros that will keep your home humming all year long. And as we turn into September, you know that means fall is coming, and that means cooler weather is on its way eventually. Don't wish away summer just yet, but it means it's on its way eventually. If you're thinking about getting your heating fixed in time for the winter, don't wait, don't delay. Call our friends over at Ace Hardware and Ace Hardware Home Services. They bring understanding, experience, and of course, that helpful hardware service folks feel right to your front door. They'll offer you free estimates on equipment installation and replacement with trusted advisors and options that are best suited for your home and your budget. And their team is local. They live and serve in your community and are dedicated to keeping your neighbors comfortable in their home. So head on over to Ace Hardware Home Services at acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next project today.
We'll now hear from our friends over at Xfinity, because Tyler, we've all been there. You go over to a friend's place. You're excited to watch football. Hey, I'm going to stream the game here. You come, we'll enjoy the game together. You get there, and the setup's a mess. You get lagging, you get buffering, you're switching between apps. You're trying to find what's the best connection. We're restarting the modem. You're restarting this, you're restarting that. He claimed he was a big fan, but you feel like you've been fan fished. You call yourself a football fan. You've got to have Xfinity. It's the ultimate sports destination. You can find the best games, your favorite teams, all in one place. The way you watch, next level. It's the perfect fan flex. You've got all the action right there in your living room. Plus, Xfinity's got the best picture, the best sound, enhanced 4K. It's so clear, it feels like you're sitting there in the stadium. Sometimes you've got 4 games going at once. You got the multi-view going on. Why not? And on top of that, you get the real-time notifications. You get live stats right there on your TV. It's the best seat in the house every single time. So next game day, make sure that big fan, you go over to their house, it's not a big fail. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Xfinity, imagine that. Restrictions apply. Multi-view requires Xfinity 4K capable TV box.
Yeah, I went over to a buddy's house this weekend for a housewarming party and to watch the game with a whole bunch of Penn State fans. And I walked out the back, and the TV was outside, and I went, hopefully this works, right? Because sometimes when you do the porch view, it doesn't give it perfect, crystal clear.
There we go.
Because they had Xfinity. Makes sense, right? All right, welcome back to the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. We're brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. All right, before we turn our attention to FIU, wanted to do this each and every week with you. Came up with a top 5 list of our own for the after week 1 heading into week 2. Now, number 1 falls in Texas. They lose to Ohio State, who of course was number 3, and I think it was understanding that they, one of these 2 really highly touted teams were unfortunately going to have to lose. And in this case, it was Texas. But also Clemson losing to LSU. A handful of different top 10 teams. Alabama losing to unranked Florida State. There were a handful of teams in the top 10 that went down this weekend. So before we get to our top 10, I want to ask you 2 questions. One, I guess the first question being, which of those top tier, top 10, top 15 style rankings was the best game for you? And then were there any surprises for you within those games?
Yeah, I would say the best game, most entertaining game was probably LSU Clemson. I think I went wall to wall on Saturday. I took everything in as much as I could. I didn't bounce around too. I bounced around during the 3:30 window. You watched a little bit of Penn State Nevada, had an eye, as well as that Alabama Florida State game. But obviously that became a laugher pretty quickly down there in Tallahassee. But to me, the most entertaining game was that LSU Clemson game. Disappointing loss for Clemson for a couple of reasons, but that game was probably the best from wire to wire.
All right, so I came up with a top 5 now. As you brought up, a couple of top 10 teams lost. I'm going to give you my top 5, and then I'm interested in your thoughts. This is not necessarily where I think they're going to be ranked. It's just the teams that I think after week 1 deserve to have top 5 conversations. And I'll start off at number 1. As much as I would love to say you were number 2, you won your game, you deserve to go to number 1, Penn State didn't do anything to say they're the number 1 team in the nation right now. Ohio State did. And to me, Ohio State right now should be the number 1 team in the country. And because of that, I rank them at number 1. I will still have Penn State stay at number 2. They didn't do anything to lose that spot either. They just took care of business. So I will have Penn State go to number 2. This is where maybe a surprise comes in. Up to number 3, making a pretty sizable leap in the top 10, I'm going to put LSU at number 3. I think beating Clemson was a solid win, and as you brought up, it was a good game throughout. Number 4, I'm going to go with Georgia, and then number 5, I'm going to say Oregon. So here is my top 5 after the first week. Ohio State 1, Penn State 2, LSU 3, Georgia 4, and Oregon 5. And as much as that pains me to see Ohio State at the top, it does give me a little bit of happiness as a fan of a Big Ten team to see that there could very well be 3 Big Ten teams in the top 5, not just in my rankings, but potentially in the real top 5 in the coming hours or so.
Yeah, I was interested to see where you would have LSU because I agree with you wholeheartedly that I do think that they belong at number 3. I do think that there's a chance. I mean, there's a chance that the committee sticks them up there at number 2 after that win against Clemson on the road. But I do think that when you look at, I shouldn't say the committee because we're not doing committee rankings yet, but you know what I mean? I think when you're looking at that 5, I've got no big issues. How far down would you drop Texas after that?
I think probably 6-7 range. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer. Now, I will say this. I think there's 2 separators in this one. One, I'm a big believer in if you lose to another highly touted team, I don't think you should fall like terribly far unless you get embarrassed, right? Like when Indiana was the 5th ranked team in the country last year and they played Ohio State and Ohio State basically laughed them off the field after the first quarter. That's a big fall to me because it basically says you were not as good as we expected you to be. I think Arch Manning played really poorly. I think Texas's defense played really well, but I think their offense just did not have any click to it. I would say 6 to 8 range is about as far as I would let them go, but I think probably in that 6 to 8 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The other team I think that's an interesting question because of the similar style loss is Clemson. I would say they probably don't fall outside of the top 10, but maybe a little bit further back, because they lost to LSU, who was, what were they, 10, I believe, or 11 at the time of the loss. They're probably towards the back end of the top 10, but I don't think they fall terribly far either. I think both of those teams, Texas and Clemson, are still going to be very good. Their defenses, I believe, are 2 of the best in the country. It's just about the quarterback play with Texas. Arch Manning looked like he was throwing off his back foot a lot in that game against Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little less worried, I think, overall than what the general public was in terms of Arch Manning after going through the film on Sunday morning. He didn't play great. Obviously, we know that. I wouldn't even say he played a good game, obviously. I think when you're looking at it, this was a guy making his 3rd start on the road, tough environment against a new defensive coordinator coming from the NFL, hadn't coordinated a defense in a while. Like, I think that when you're looking at it, just a lot of factors at play there. And I think Matt Patricia outcoached Steve Sarkisian and that offensive staff. I mean, they threw a lot at them. It was a lot of vertical downfield passes from that offensive staff with Texas, with the Longhorns, and they just didn't hit on them. I mean, you look at it for a number of different reasons. Maybe the coverage was great. You force a check down, you get an incompletion here. You have the ball's out a tick late on another. That's an interception. So to me, that they just went feast or famine from a play calling standpoint, where it's run, vertical shot, run, vertical shot. Not enough layups built into the offense. You didn't see Arch Manning get into any kind of a rhythm whatsoever. And then by the time you needed him to get into a rhythm, he's throwing off platform. He's trying to throw around guys, which we applaud some quarterbacks for. But when you miss, it's like, the mechanics aren't sound. So I think at the end of the day, they're going to go back. They're going to tinker. They're going to try and improve things. They've got a little bit of a weaker schedule here in the next 2 or 3 weeks before they get into the meat of their SEC schedule. So we'll see what Texas does to try and improve. But I'm not throwing out all my Arch Manning stock. I think a lot of people were very quick to dump dirt on him after a less than spectacular debut. But we'll see what he looks like here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think that there was a pretty common theme around college football that some of these big-time quarterbacks, some of them didn't play as sharply as maybe we would have expected. And then some of them, in the case of like Lenora Sellers, for example, I thought was really good for South Carolina for the most part, especially in that 4th quarter. The other game that I wanted to get into really quickly before we transition to FIU was the one that happened Sunday night, Miami and Notre Dame. Miami wins 27-24. I am not a Carson Beck fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I got to give credit where it's due. 20 of 31, protected the football, 205 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Notre Dame made a furious comeback at the end, scoring 17 of their 24 points in the fourth quarter. But it looked like for a pretty sizable chunk of that game, Miami was significantly the better team, which was kind of stunning to me. I did not expect that to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had Carson Beck coming into the year as my QB6, a guy that I think I'm probably a little bit higher on than consensus. I don't have a starting grade on him right now, but I do think that he can be kind of like a high-end backup, low-end starter. Compared like a Jimmy Garoppolo type of tier. I just think that he's got the ability to make a lot of throws that you're looking to see. It was a bad year for him last year at Georgia. I'm excited to see if he can continue to build on positive momentum here in his final season in college. It was interesting. Just kind of looking at some of the numbers, and I was given this information of the top 5 favorites for the number 1 pick coming into coming into college football. So Arch Manning, Garrett Nussmeier, Lenora Sellers, Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller. Now, all of them for varying reasons. No one threw more than 1 touchdown the entire week, which it was really, and a couple of these guys obviously came away with losses. You look at Arch Manning, you look at Cade Klubnik. So I think when you're looking at this group, I'm still excited about this quarterback class overall, but from a box score standpoint, no one really blew the doors off it. But Carson Beck, a nice debut there for the Hurricanes.
So I do want to ask you, and this will be the last NFL draft related question comparing to these guys, at least for right now. Is it a quantity group more than a quality group? Like, I think that there are good players, don't get me wrong, but is it a group of, like, last year we saw one quarterback go in the first round in Cam Ward. There was a couple of years ago where Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback that went in the first round, and then there was a bunch of like 3s and 4 rounds guys. Is this a grouping that will have multiple first-round picks that's quantity, or is there legitimate NFL quality to this group?
It's both, but the big thing is that you're still talking about a sample size of players where a lot of them are young still.
Sure.
Arch Manning, redshirt sophomore; Lenora Sellers, redshirt sophomore; Sam Levitt, redshirt sophomore. Fernando Mendoza at Indiana could go back, has another year of eligibility. We know we're going to see Drew Aller. We know we're going to see Cade Klubnik. We know we're going to see Garrett Nussmeier. Now, some people think Klubnik is a first-round guy. I personally don't see Klubnik that way. Drew Aller, is he going to be a first-round guy, or is he more of a day 2 talent? I'm a big Nussmeier fan. I think that he showed out well on Saturday night against Clemson. So I feel good about him, in the top half of round 1. But all these other guys, you almost want to see it play out the rest of the year. And there's a couple other names we can throw in. So I do think that it's, to answer your question, I think it's a little bit of both. If all of these guys throw their hat into the ring, yeah, you're going to see a few of them go in the first round. If a bunch of the redshirt sophomores go back for another year, well, now you lessen the pool a little bit. So that'll be something certainly we can continue to track.
All right, so let's turn our attention to FIU. So last week, as we said, Nevada came into this one ranked. This was CBS Sports rankings. They were ranked 120th out of 136 teams. This week coming in, or at least into the preseason, FIU ranked 123. So an even further slip for the opponent this week against Penn State. Now, they beat Bethune-Cookman last week 42-9. They had 4 different players run for 6 touchdowns. But I think really what this team centers around, their offense centers around, is their quarterback. Kyron Jenkins. He ran for 2 touchdowns. Here's just the list of acknowledgments for Jenkins over the preseason. 2025 Conference USA Preseason Offensive Player of the Year. 2025 Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Watch List. 2025 Davey O'Brien Award Preseason Watch List. 2025 Manning Award Watch List. Walter Camp Preseason Player of the Year Watch List. Maxwell Award Watch List as well. Now, obviously, these watch lists are a ton of different players. But to have a quarterback from FIU maybe jumps off the page a little bit. And, I didn't do a ton of deep dive, but in my brief kind of prep to watch this guy, there was a lot of things that I thought were really impressive. Dual threat quarterback. He's run the ball almost 200 times, including the first game against Bethune-Cookman this year in his career. Really strong play extender. And I think he's a left-handed quarterback, by the way, a guy who's willing to roll to his right and then go across his body. Good arm. I think the play extension, though, to me, friend, is the thing that jumps out the most when I was watching some of his highlights.
Yeah, I think that, look, this is a guy that I think has the ability to be a good college quarterback. The resume speaks for itself. He's in his third year as a starter down there for the Golden Panthers. And I'm going to be honest, like when I watched the game on both sides of the ball, and I just kind of buzzed through the film against Bethune-Cookman. You talked to earlier at the very top of the show about how, week one, it's vanilla. Sure. It was very vanilla on both sides, for this team. So, we'll see if they've got some more tricks up their sleeve here week 2, going up against Penn State. But I was not entirely moved, and I would say I kind of was more impressed with what I saw from Nevada than what I saw for last week from FIU. And so we'll see. It could be that they were kind of saving their best here to take their best shot at Penn State. But I think this should be another example for Penn State to just kind of go take care of business, work on what you need to work on, get some good reps for some young players and play on for next week against Villanova.
And I think the mobile quarterback portion of it for the second week in a row, Purdy had the ability to extend plays last week, and he did so a couple of times. And I think we're going to see, Jenkins do it again this week. I was kind of interested to hear you say, though, that you were a little bit more impressed with what Nevada did. Now, I guess doing it against Penn State versus doing it against Bethune-Cookman, but interested in that regard because, I think you put up a 42 spot, even if it is against an FCS opponent, maybe the antenna pops up a little bit and you say, hey, this team can move the ball. I guess it's relative to expectations. But I am kind of intrigued to hear you say that, you were actually more impressed with what Nevada did in their sample size against Penn State.
Yeah, and even just kind of watching, it's like, all right, like who is anybody popping off the film? But I just didn't see anything from FIU to kind of move the needle for me in that way.
So I think, again, another game where your expectations are probably lopsided, probably see a bulk of the younger guys get to extra playing time. I don't know if we'll see 73 guys again this week, but I would imagine you will see probably 50 plus for a second consecutive week as they start to maybe shrink things down a little bit. But again, I think this is going to be another opportunity for Penn State to get some of their young guys quite a bit of action.
Yeah, you want to go out, make sure that, again, how is Aller, building this rapport with some of these young receivers? I think that's going to be big here for this team and a big talking point for us over the next couple of weeks.
All right, friend, that's just about ready to wrap things up here on the All Nittany Lion podcast. As always, a ton of fun to be with you. We'll continue to monitor the quarterbacks throughout the college football landscape. We'll continue to monitor the top 10. We'll do our top 5 each and every week. We'll kind of bounce back and forth and see where each other's feeling in terms of the top 5 teams across college football. And we'll check back in as we break down the FIU tape and then get you set for Villanova, an FCS opponent who may be better than some of the teams in the FBS level when the season ends, because Villanova has been kind of a preeminent playoff team at the FCS level over the last decade or so. So, it could be a team that, has some FCS playoff aspirations. Now, I will say this. I don't think, Fran, as you brought up with not being super excited about the FIU tape, I don't think we're going to see a Bowling Green situation in this non-conference schedule where Bowling Green came into Penn State, came into Beaver Stadium with a veteran quarterback in Connor Bazelak, Harold Fannin, who just went in this year's NFL draft. And they weren't scared by the moment. And they took Penn State to the wire and played probably with a better team in the first half of that game against Penn State. I don't think we're going to see that type of situation in this non-conference slate over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that's, you still have to go out and make sure you go handle business. But I think for us on the outside, yeah, this is absolutely an opportunity for you. Don't want this to come down to even be talking about this in the second half.
All right, so that'll do it for the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. Big thank you to everybody who hung out with us today. Of course, a big thank you to you, Fran, for being a part of this as well. We'll be back with you next week to break down the tape against FIU, to discuss Villanova as we get closer and closer to the Big Ten schedule for the Penn State Nittany Lions. So we'll be back at 5 o'clock next week here on the All Nittany Lion podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Branded Bills. Use that code BBPHLY for 15% off your first purchase. We are broadcasting live from the Xfinity mobile studios, and we'll be back next week at 5 o'clock as we break down FIU, talk about Villanova, get you set for the Big Ten football schedule coming up just around the corner right here on the All Nittany Lion podcast. All right, we'll talk to you next week. See ya.